I'd like each member of our panel to introduce themselves with maybe their title, but also their layer of interest and level of interest. And then we'll do some questions that we've written some of them, but I want them really to talk among each other. Okay, if we start with Dave.
I'm Dave Guiga. I work with AstraZeneca Pharmaceuticals. I'm part of the commercial operations and strategy organization where I lead our marketing partnerships and innovation team. So I'm focused on finding innovative solutions for our brand teams to ensure that they consistently meet our customers' changing needs. Prior to joining AstraZeneca 3 years ago, I spent 9 years in management consulting in pharmaceutical marketing operations, sales operations.
Thank you, David. Mary.
My name is Mary Varghese. I'm with Pfizer, and at Pfizer I work on what we call the Commercial Model Innovation Team, where I lead health IT, focused on adapting our sales and marketing models for the huge shift in the environment specific to a healthcare system that's moving from a paper-based system to an EHR-driven system. Prior to coming to Pfizer, I was also in management consulting, and my most relevant consulting prior to joining Pfizer was actually I was consulting with the ONC on use cases for quality and payment reform, and also on requirements for meaningful use.
David.
Good morning, everyone. My name is David Zied. I work with Bayer Healthcare, and my title is Business Operations. Very different from, I think, my compatriots up here, and probably the others that work on EHRs out there with other pharma companies. I became interested in EHRs and I work on the oncology side of our business at Bayer Healthcare. I became interested in EHRs when we tried to figure out how to launch a couple of new products differently into the marketplace. And I started doing a lot of Googling and researching and realizing that there was this thing out there called meaningful use, and physicians were changing their workflow. So that's how I became very, very passionate about this particular topic. And despite the fact that it's not actually in my title, I spend a good chunk of my time actually doing this. So I'm really glad to be here.
Good morning. I'm Nancy Phelan, and I lead the Customer Engagement Center at Bristol-Myers Squibb. And I've been there for about a year and a half. And we are responsible for delivering multi-channel capabilities across the entire U.S. business, as well as archetyping the future customer model and how we really think about evolving our capabilities to really drive exquisite and seamless external customer experience and satisfaction. And I have a variety of roles and experiences prior to being at BMS. I was at Pfizer, before that Wyeth, before that Schering-Plough. Many times it was not an intentional choice to move, but rather that the company was acquired. And so it's fun to be part of the dynamic pharma environment. And I've had a lot of roles, mostly in the commercial space, spanning sales, marketing, and managed care.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Brent Rose. I work for Daiichi Sankyo in our consumer and multi-channel marketing group. I really have two parts of my job. The first part, and probably the most important part, is working across all of our U.S. brands, helping them determine how to translate their brand objectives and strategies into digital strategies and objectives. And then another part of my job is looking outside of the brands and identifying what channels and opportunities, both through emerging media or developing channels, does the company need to start to consider and explore. So prior to Daiichi Sankyo, I worked with Schering-Plough and a number of different pharmaceutical partners and ad agencies. And happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And you can see we have a diverse panel. And what we're going to do, the way this panel is going to be set up, is we're going to show a slide that you can look at. And then using that slide, we're going to follow up with some questions and answers based on that slide. So we might as well go to the first slide, which... a little feedback, that's probably a little better, which we're calling the Manhattan Research slide for obvious reason. Also, what they were doing was they took the pulse, basically, and they wanted to look at physicians to see if they were interested in accessing more content through EHR systems. And their answers are displayed, as you can see on the screen. When you look at that, is an EHR strategy being developed or strategic priority for your company? And if so, how is it being implemented? So you see this, maybe any of you can open up and address, is your company doing this and addressing that?
So I'm happy to start the conversation. I do expect it will be a conversation. So Bristol-Myers Squibb, we do see that the use of EHR and EMR and HIT is a strategic driver. And so we actually have a global team, a pursuit team that's in place that helps us identify and structure a framework, because it's very important. We've got different markets developing and adopting this capability at differential paces and with different guidelines and regulatory environments. So we need to be able to have a framework to assess opportunities and then identify where we do want to engage and have a strategic partnership. When that determination is made, it turns over to the market. And what's really critical at the local market is many times we're leading at the front. And so what this means is that you don't have a clear pathway. So you've got to be able to pull in different teams, the legal expert, the medical expert. And what we're finding is that rather than build it out on a brand by brand basis, it's actually better to identify a core champion in those critical disciplines that really becomes the expert and helps to craft and partner. I'm looking forward to the topic later on today about how to do the MLR review. I'm sure I'm going to learn a few things. But I think certainly in the case of the adoption and identifying the customer and the commercial value, it really does take an integrated team at the very local level. So I don't think it's sufficient to just have global, strategic teams in place. You've really got to be able to have teams on the ground in the markets to pull this through.
Now, when you look at this data, there's an opportunity there for education, clearly. Also, an opportunity for marketing. Do any of you see your companies perhaps using this for a dual role? Anybody addressing it? Mary?
I think one of the things we're doing really with the EHR transformation is looking at it from the perspective of it's in addition to being a channel that's more widely used through which we could do the things we've always done, but through a different or more optimally used through a different vehicle. But there's also things we could never do before that we potentially can now do in partnership with our customers as they're trying to get to outcomes. And there are things we used to do that we don't need to do anymore because it's not relevant anymore now that everyone is in their EHR. So I think a couple of the key things we're working on is building organizational capabilities across marketing and sales, but also identifying those things that are really new from a pharma engagement as well. So not traditional things we've done that we can now do in an EHR, but things we've never thought of that we can now do.
Okay, and looking at these slides, is there any other comments or thoughts any of you have about them reacting to that information? Dave?
So I'll just add to that, looking at the slide and looking at the different categories of what physicians are saying that they value, it's reassuring to us as pharma because when we think about what we do for, from a brand's perspective to provide services to a doctor and to patients, these are really, you go down that list of things that we spend the majority of our time, focused on doing. I think that the challenge becomes how do you integrate these tactics into a broader cross-channel MPP strategy, including EHR, when EHR is so fragmented. So there's so many different EHR systems out there, and trying to get these types of services into multiple EHR systems, and Nancy, to your point, is a challenge internally due to things like MLR, but also from a budget standpoint as well.
And I'd echo that comment. I mean, looking at the slide, everything on that slide are things that we want to accomplish. The challenge, as you mentioned, is how do we do this in a way that's scalable considered the fragmented market? And I think for our organization, we just kind of have to get past that and understand that, like most emergent channels in information technology, the scale is going to come eventually. So now's probably the best time to start figuring out what's the way to play most effectively in some of those channels and to accomplish many of those things on the slide.
Okay, so that we can always come back to this a little later in our discussion if there's questions from the audience, but I want to move to the next slide, one near and dear to my heart, that today's healthcare providers spend the majority of their workday interacting with patients and EHR systems and not much else, and it certainly raises discussions. And I'll mention here, I'm sitting here, I have 2 smartphones, one's for work, one's for media, one's for this, one's for that, Twitter, everything. We are like locked into them. So I'm a somewhat typical physician, I like to think, and I use the phones. So do you see a way to reach out to physicians using mobile media and things they're taking away with them during the day to help them out? Has that been a point of discussion?
So I'll take a stab at that one. The EHR channel, I think, is very much a real channel today for pharmaceutical marketing. In the past, there's been just sort of a lot of e-marketing, there's been a lot of websites, and I think this is just a really huge opportunity for us to take a look at things in a very different sort of a way. Physicians are married to their spouse as well as their EHR, and they do live there. And I think the onus is on us to try to figure out how exactly to integrate the information that we have, that it's available to physicians into these systems. I also, I mentioned before, I work on the oncology side, and I think it was mentioned in the previous panel that, we're trying to integrate various sorts of clinical decision support into these systems to give it, further evidence, things like NCCN guidelines in oncology. And I know there's a number of companies that are working towards this, and that's what's really going to give this a great deal of value sort of moving forward.
With taking all that into account, you have the patient and the doctor, and they're in a closed exam room. So you, in a way now, unlike the old days where maybe a drug representative would come and detail a physician, wait in the office, and get a few minutes in the doctor's little office waiting area, it now has become an opportunity to access them real time. Getting that point further, I like the idea of the data thing. What messages do you see you want to provide them with if you have that opportunity? Like you get that limited shot, which might be part of something. What would you want to get across?
Well, I'll take a stab at that. Yeah. I think the kind of information that we need to provide is the clinical decision support. I don't think physicians want to see advertising and banners and that kind of stuff unless they've opted for one of the free EHRs, but I don't think that they want that kind of information, and I don't think that's really where pharma is actually able to provide the greatest value. It's in things that the physicians actually do want to know about and help them in their practice, as well as the office staff, things like reimbursement materials, things like copay support programs and things like that they need embedded in their workflow that they may not be able to have otherwise. They may need to source this in a whole bunch of other different places, which creates a lot of inefficiency in an office space.
So I would agree with that completely. If we could get to the doctor during the patient visit, letting the doctor know that they're prescribing or they have the opportunity to prescribe much more than a pill. We have several programs. I think all of our companies provide programs beyond just the medicine. And at that point of care, to let that doctor know, you can write your prescription, but you can also get your patient on board with a medication adherence program or a general health and wellness type program, the savings programs. There's a slew of great programs that we provide, and getting that to the doctor at point of care is critical.
Anybody else, Mary?
Yeah, I think that we really see it as an accelerant of being able to make sure that the programs and services that every one of us offers is actually accessed right at the right time, that it's not sitting back in a case manager's file or in a sample closet or something like that. I think that's really exciting. But I do think one of the challenges is the granularity. So it's not sufficient just to have a contractor relationship in place at the high level with the parent company, but then you've got to really pull it through on the local level. So if you've got different treatment algorithms or different protocols that different systems have in place, you've got to make sure that you've got that local piece pulled through and that your offering syncs up with the local account level. So that's a very different way of thinking about how you go to market, because historically when you think about digital or mobile, it's generally a national buy, a large placement, you cut the check, you get it processed, you're done. This is a very different way of doing it, because you've got the national larger scale, but then you've also got more of an account based. And I think what is emerging is that this gives us the opportunity to truly have greater integration between our marketing and our sales or customer-facing teams. And in some cases, that we're really good at that. In other cases, we haven't necessarily had to get very good at cooperation. And so I think that depending on the disease and the seniority of the teams in place, you've got variable approaches that I think we've got some more work ahead of us.
Before we move to our next slide, I think Mary wanted to make some.
Brian, you had originally started by asking about the message. One of the things I often think about is that the EHR is a means to an end, and ONC, the government, payers have made the end very clear. And so when we think about how we message our brands, it's really been historically around the features and benefits, the clinical features and benefits. But the healthcare system and the EHR is making this possible, is really holding providers accountable for being accountable for care, for outcomes, for efficiency, for patient engagement. And so I think one of the things that we do need to do is think about how do you redefine the value proposition of your brand. It's not any longer just the clinical features and benefits. Are there other benefits? Which really goes way upstream in terms of how do you now start designing trials a little bit differently? What are some of the things you want to be able to test out to include in your value proposition? And I think these are all really broad implications of what the EHR is doing in healthcare.
Well, I think, you all kind of alluded to something which really gets into our next slide, which is the idea of workflow. The fact that if you can reach out to the provider in their workflow, that's when you get them. I know me, if I'm there, I'm doing my charts, I'm working with the patients, but it's even at the end of the day, when I'm just finishing things up, I want to finish that. I want to finish it rapidly. I really don't want new information, but I really can use information that impacts the decisions I'm making. So if it's in the workflow, I think your end user is going to be happy because you're helping them out. At least that's my perspective. Your perspective, is that kind of the direction you're going at it from? I mean, I know there's a variety of reasons to impact it, but is that one of the big things? Anybody on the idea of workflow?
Yes, it is, but to me, one of the things that's rather frustrating about EHR is an emergent channel is any other emergent channel is pretty easy to get up to speed on. So it was mentioned earlier, and if you want to understand Twitter, nobody really reads a book about how to use Twitter. You just start using it, and soon you say, okay, now I'm an expert on Twitter. EHR doesn't really afford us that opportunity as a layperson. So to me, one of the things that's important is I believe that there is certainly that opportunity within the workflow, and the contextual relevance of that message is critical. But I don't know what that experience is like, and I can only get it secondhand. So where we are today versus where I think we need to be and how we incorporate those messages into the workflow in an effective way, I feel like there's a huge gap that we have yet to fill. And it needs to be filled in a way that is completely different than almost any emergent channel we've dealt with.
That's a good point. If you read these key success factors, things like content must be deemed valuable, clinically relevant to the patient visit, physicians prefer to control when and how they view the content, user experience must be intuitive and require little training, I can vouch on that, and information must be sourced from a reputable, trustworthy provider. And I think all of us would agree with them and with the pitfalls. I think that's a really good summary of things. So knowing this, are you working with others to develop creative ways to somehow have these success factors instituted into your message or implemented in some way?
So at AstraZeneca we are, and I could say that the easy road was to do the lift and shift method, so taking a lot of our existing online type media placements and moving them into some of the EHR systems, reworking them if needed. And we know that that's clearly not the path to success. So luckily for AZ, we do have our centralized innovations group, as well as a very strong media agency that's helping our brand teams understand what it means to move away from kind of your comfort zone and moving into more of a meaningful type message or content that can go into a workflow. There are, of course, barriers along the way there, but we know where we need to go, and we're headed there.
I think one of the things that's unique about EHR, and I share your observations as well, is that what it allows a finer point on is the timeliness of the information. And I think therein lies an area where we're still learning, because we do have a lot of information that we can provide, and it's very easy to pick it up and to have a hypothesis in terms of where in the workflow it would be most appropriate. But what this really offers us is a way to get it timed out with, I think, far more precision. And so I think that's an area of insight and analysis that we still have as something that we're learning on our agenda. And I don't think we've exactly figured that out. So I think more work ahead.
What about the idea, and it's one of the questions, kind of a long question, but I'll try to simplify it. What about the idea that, some managed care organizations would rather you go generic? You might think something is better as a brand. How do you use this to somehow explain to the physician why that brand may be more effective than a generic? Or not, but I mean, whatever your goals would be.
Well, I think, one of the opportunities that we have as sort of branded manufacturers, of course, is the fact that we offer, a lot of additional value-added services that, a branded company may not obviously offer. And those are the things that we're trying to make the physician, aware of. And, you may actually get better adherence potentially based on a wraparound services that may be available in the workflow because they're at the point of care in the EHR system.
So in other words, you're helping that workflow process, so your decision-making, it walks you along the path to help your patient, I guess.
Yeah, and there's a lot of opportunities I think that we have too to touch the patient as well as the physician from many different angles as well through the EHR, not only through the basic EHR, but also there's incredible opportunities that we have as manufacturers through the advent of the patient portals as well, and to include information on there relative to adherence and co-pays and just various other things that, quite frankly, we haven't even thought of yet that can be embedded into these systems. We're just really scratching the tip of the iceberg, I think.
Did you want to make a point?
So this is a topic near and dear to anyone at AstraZeneca's heart, with having a lot of generics in our therapeutic areas. And the most important thing is for differentiation is letting that doctor know that, again, in addition to our medicines comes, a patient toolkit per se, that helps that doctor get that patient to better health outcomes, get them to goal, which you may necessarily not get with a generic.
You guys would be better at quantifying and figuring out, but I think one of the great things we're going to need is when the patient portal is being used in lab information and things are out, will there be some sort of verbal, video, easy to understand explanation of the data they're looking at? Because I will tell you that when we send people information, even side effects of medications, we send them their labs. If something's off by 0.02 or it's in red, it freaks people out. And I don't care, they can have their information. If they don't understand it, they need that explanation. So if somebody's on board with that, that might be a potential thing which would help physicians in their workflow too, just as something I'm thinking of.
Just to build
Yeah.
on that, I think the issue and the skill set around health literacy that you allude to is really going to be a critical success factor in terms of making these patient portals real, and also really appreciating and realizing the full potential that patient engagement and shared decision making offers us. I don't know that we necessarily have robust understanding and application in a consistent way of health literacy principles. So I think that's an area that I know at Bristol-Myers Squibb we've put significant effort behind it, but I don't believe that that you see it fully realized in terms of what we put out into the market yet.
I almost think there should be an Office of Health Literacy, which would be more valuable than some of the other offices, but that's just my personal perspective.
A topic for the next time.
The more people are educated and control their own care, the better they're going to do, and then they're more informed, and then if you've got something good to tell them, they'll go there. But moving on, this is really interesting. This is the Digiday banner ad. I think banner ads are now 18 years old. I mean, that's what it says here. And these are statistics which are pretty dramatic. Over 5.3 trillion display ads were served to U.S. users last year. That's 1 trillion more than 2009. The click-through rates are 0.1%. You're more likely to survive a plane crash than click a banner ad. Interesting. Taking that information, what are your perspectives on banner ads? And I mean, I got some of your input just in your answering questions, but as far as using them with physicians in the EMR.
So as the old lady here on the panel, I have to say that when I was working at Sharing, leading the Claritin DTC group, my team was actually the first team to launch the first banner ad in pharma for Claritin. And we used different numbers at that time to build the business case for why we needed to be in banner ads. So I think it just is, another proof point that we're in a very complex world, that communication channels are constantly evolving, and that just because you've got one, something new doesn't mean that it's going to be permanently there. And I think that the opportunity for us is to really understand and have solutions in place whereby we do more test and learn, because there are going to be some things that endure forever. I think reps are one of those channels that are going to endure forever. Are they going to evolve? Absolutely. But I think that that's the larger opportunity. But it is really alarming to look through that, because it's really changed quite significantly.
Other comments?
I definitely agree with Nancy. There's no question. I mean, basic marketing tells you that you want to provide information for customers from many different channels. And, as far as branding is concerned, helping with, keep a logo in front of somebody in the right place at the right time is always going to be helpful, and I think that's where your banner ads potentially are going to sort of remain. But like you said, the value of a rep and how the way I see it actually happening is that based on the information in the workflow, that actually is going to create additional opportunities for our salespeople to talk and engage our customers in dialogue that they actually have never even thought of having with them. We're starting to see it a little bit now, but I think the information that we're doing, and we're having some of the pilots that we have going on at Bayer with some of the EMR manufacturers, are actually enabling our reps to gain access and to have an incredible amount of time just talking about this topic, because this is on top of mind for everyone in the office, not only the staff, but the physicians themselves as they struggle to sort of figure out, what the future is going to look like. So different opportunities are going to present themselves, and I think we have to be aware of that.
One of the other questions that was suggested to me and I thought was interesting is there are, and I think you alluded to them, some of the free EHRs have the ads as part of them. Is there any data collected on that as far as effectiveness? Is it working? Is it not working? Any information? Do any of you know that? I don't know if you do or not, but I'm wondering.
Just looking at your slide, we always say that the benchmark for banner clicks is that nobody clicks on a banner. So if your banner strategy is predicated on click-through rates, you're probably going to be disappointed in the long run. And that's not to say that there isn't value to that. There is, but especially when you're considering the workflow, I don't expect, as your previous slide mentioned, you want to kind of not disrupt the workflow. You want to deliver that message in time. So I don't know if click rates on the banner in the EHR is necessarily going to be your most important factor. The things that we've seen in advancements of things like banner ads is not so much on the ability to increase the click rates, it's the ability to more effectively deliver that message and measure it in means outside of the click rate. Okay. And I think the EHR gives that exact opportunity, and that's what we're trying to leverage there.
Okay. One more, yeah.
I think one of the things that's frustrating from a pharma perspective is that we are challenged by the state of the landscape of the EHR world, right? So, it's probably akin to mid-90s, as you showed in your video, in terms of dial-up, modems and things like that. And we're also challenged by the rate of, where our customer base is in terms of adoption. So you have these two things that are significantly in flux at the same time. We're trying to figure out how to add value, how to enter the workflow in a way that's palatable to the providers and, all these sorts of things. So, I just think it's important to keep in mind that everything's evolving and it's important for us as pharma to evolve with the marketplace. But I think, these banner ads are the bare minimum that we can do given where things are. It's not like, I don't know, I don't think people were getting customized messages from Amazon in 1995 when we were just trying to figure out how to dial up, and it takes, 10 minutes to get the connection. So I just want to sort of point out kind of where we are in this continuum. It's still kind of early days.
Sure. Let's go to our last slide because I'm going to see if I can get some questions from the audience as well. But, what do patients want? I mean, this is another whole group we can look at. And, when you look at digital communications, you look at things like appointment reminders, seasonal reminders, payment reminders, those types of things. And you can see what they found here about baby boomers and their approach. So knowing this information that you're looking at, have you given thought, I'm sure you have, but have you given any thought to the EHR as a means to connect with the patient through the clinician? And if so, how? How do you make that next step through the clinician?
Well, at the most basic level, it's some of the things we talked about earlier, and that's providing access to some of the information and support services that we're currently developing for patients. The Pill Plus strategy is amongst almost every brand in pharma today, and we need to find more channels to make that happen. I've seen firsthand doctors look at patient support materials and services that we provided and say, oh, that's great, I've never heard about this, when meanwhile we've had it for 3 years post-launch. So just finding different ways to get access to that, I think, is probably the easiest opportunity. But what I'm hopeful for, as we move forward, there's more activity in self-monitoring tools and patient support applications and even devices, and those are great. But there's no feedback loop. So to me, and I don't know if this would ever be possible, but I'm hopeful that EHR might somewhere in the future bring this, is that there might be an opportunity to start to connect what those patients are using in terms of digital tools for managing their own wellness and to feed that back into the EHR so you can have more of a consistent loop from what the patients are doing once they leave the office to when they're back in the office with the doctor.
So I'll add something. I think you're spot on, Brent. And I think one of the things that, pharma sort of tends to do, just historically, because it's kind of what we do, is we tend to focus on the healthcare practitioner, right? So I think this sort of affords us an entirely different sort of an opportunity as consumerism sort of begins, and where the patients have more influence on their actual care, is to actually go to the patients, a novel thing, and sort of ask them what is it that they actually do want in their EHRs, and really listen to them in a way that we probably haven't in the past, because pharma tends to focus on the messaging, and the messaging tends to go to the healthcare practitioners. But I think we have a really good opportunity in that light to actually ask the patients what they want, and formulate those sorts of materials within the EHRs and the portals.
David, it's interesting. I was at a conference about 3 weeks ago where there was a Dr. Louis Francis Scuti. I don't know if you heard of him, but he's from Canada. And he was, interesting, by the way, in his bio, he's one of the top 100 physicians of the century. And I thought, that's really cool. How do you get to be one of the top 100 physicians of the century, and who makes the list? But that, besides the point, this Dr. Francis Scuti basically came out and said, your healthcare providers are your patients. They are the future healthcare providers. The rest of you are all facilitating their healthcare, but they are the providers. There is definitely many people, and a strong group of people out there, who want the patient to be more and more involved in their care. And I think this goes to that, what you're talking about. So if you're trying to reach them, have you thought of like incentives, coupons, partnering coupons? They gave me an example of an opioid with a laxative or something. But what do you do as far as reaching out to patients that way? Any ideas there at this point?
I think the idea around how can you drive behavior change and what partnerships can you form is one that's very compelling, that we've been working through for many, many years. We've got a leadership partnership with AstraZeneca in diabetes, and I think that the ability to really think novelly about approaches that we can take in conjunction with other partners to bring value to our patients that they actually really perceive as high value is a real opportunity. I think that's a separate conversation from how do we then deliver it. I think you've got to really think about what is that expertise, what is that value proposition, how do you change that behavior, how do you measure that behavior? To your point, do we have standard platforms across all of the consumer-facing things whereby we capture data, we organize data, we share data, similar to the scanner at the grocery store. I thought that was a great point there. I don't know that we have that. So I think that's one bucket of work that we have ahead of us, and then I think the delivery of that and timing it and sequencing it into the workflow and into patient portals, and then building those feedback loops into those systems, given that it's a very fragmented market on the national level, and they've got all the different local regional accounts, is I think a very different bucket of work. So I think it's very, very early stages, just like Mary said. We're like really early in this. I think that in 2 to 3 years, we'll be at a very accelerated point. We'll probably still be evolving. I believe we will be. But I think that we'll have more progress that we can share and be more informed. Right now, I think a lot of us are experimenting. We're taking some of the things that we have. We're learning from that as we begin to think more carefully with more strategic intent in terms of how to really shape patient engagement and be a leader in that space.
I know lunch is around the corner, and I'm fighting against that, which is tough competition. But is there any questions from the audience? Somebody who wants to raise a point based on this discussion? Yes? Okay.
EHRs present an opportunity for research and development for pharmaceutical companies. You've talked about the information you're giving out to help physicians. What's the kinds of information that you want from EHRs to help you build your business going forward in the research and development side?
I can just comment sort of from the Bayer side. The whole concept, right, of EHR still is very, very new to a lot of people in the organization. I don't know about my partners here, but I spend a great deal of time actually just going through very similar slides to what we showed today within my organization to try to get everybody in the organization sort of up to speed on what this is and sort of what it's all about. Our initial approach has been just because I happen to work on the commercial side of the business, it's been, you know, a commercial approach. The dollars also that we use to do our experimentation at this point are coming from the brands. So, you know, that's something to consider as well. As far as, you know, moving forward, in terms of sort of the clinical piece, I mean, sky's the limit. You know, one of the things that we're sort of exploring too on that end is, you know, how do we integrate our health economics into this and utilize the data from the EHRs to do that. You know, the other piece of it as well, which I think is absolutely transformational, we're just not there yet, and that is market research, right? You know, we tend to do market research the way we've done it for a long period of time, and, you know, one of the things I talk with my market intelligence people about over at Bayer is trying to modify and think differently about how you actually do market research. The things that you're able to do and the information that we're able to attain and receive from the EHR systems is, you talk about big data, it's mind-blowing, right? What we can actually get here in terms of intelligence. But like everybody's talked about today, you know, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And we're still learning. There's just a great opportunity, not only on the commercial, but, you know, obviously on the clinical side too, you know, to talk to the medical folks too about what's going on here and where there's opportunities for them too. Some companies are a little bit more, you know, advanced, but again, a great opportunity.
Great. Other questions? Yes? Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
The
A couple
light.
of the panel members have mentioned the importance of timing in the workflow. Who controls that today, and how do you expect that to evolve?
Something in the workflow, I wasn't.
Is your question about who controls the workflow as it stands, or who controls pharma engagement in the workflow?
Pharma engagement in the workflow.
In our experience, in some of the experiments that we've been running, it's very specific to the customer. So we've done some experiments with big IDNs, and it's a collaboration agreement to test certain things. When you get into these accounts, you realize that there's a whole bureaucracy inside the health delivery system around what, you know, making even the slightest change to an EHR workflow. So I think because it is early days, I think that it's pretty open to the way that you engage and what your objectives are and how you approach the different customers.
I think we have time for one more question. Yes? Oh, the mic's not on, maybe.
Hello?
There you go.
Here we go. You know, one of the things that we've heard is that there are occasionally some sort of delays in drugs getting into the EHRs for the prescribing process, and we've also heard about some issues on formulary accuracy. So is the information accurate that's being presented? Just wondering what you're doing in regard to those two things.
So this is an issue I've actually been personally working on for the past 8 months, and I would say that it is a big issue. I would characterize it as an unintended consequence of the imperative to adopt EHRs. I think there's been a huge focus on making sure that the clinical information is accurate, and not a lot of attention paid to the integrity or the stewardship of the formulary data and how it flows all the way from the payer PBM through all the different steps until you get to the point of care and what the physician is seeing and not seeing. And I think that, you know, some of the work that we've done shows that it's a timeliness in the update issue, it's a comprehensiveness of the data that's being transmitted issue, it's an accuracy of the data issue. I think the issue is in multiple places, and I think it's a real opportunity for pharma companies to come together and try to solve for this, because it's multi-layered, multi-stakeholder issue that, at least our analysis so far shows that physicians just sort of expect it to be unreliable, and so it doesn't seem to be driving their decision making. But I think with meaningful use stage 2 and especially stage 3, I think that's going to change. And I don't know market-wide whether there's a real effort around ensuring that that information is real-time and accurate.
You know, just another thought. I think a lot of the information accuracy will sort of improve as we evolve in this space. You know, I've had the fortune to work with and speak with a number of different EHR companies over the last couple of years as we've been exploring this space. And, you know, there's some that are still client-server based, and that there's some are the SaaS model or the cloud-based type. And I think they'll obviously all eventually get to a cloud-based platform, but that will sort of help in getting real-time to physicians, you know, in sort of a much better way. So I think that's going to evolve as well.
Well, David, Mary, David, Nancy, and Brent, I want to thank you for joining us. And I think it was a lively discussion. They did a great job. We should give applause for that. Thank you.